Hey everyone, Cursed Deck Builder here, making our way to 10,000 decks assisted, and today we are looking at Seizan Perverter of Truth. This is a mono black force draw deck list that comes to us from Xavier. And this is actually the second version of the deck we're going to be looking at today because we've previously done a video on it. And if you want to see this deck list early, you can always join us on our Discord, accessed by the Patreon, which is you can get in for only $1 a month. I really like it because I can post these deck lists early and people can comment on it and talk about what they would change themselves, which is helpful to me and of course can be helpful to the deck builder. But all that aside, Xavier has a very specific thing which I completely understand. And they say, this is the second submission for my Seizan deck, and there's a new problem. Seizan? I'm not sure. Regardless. Specifically, everyone hates this deck, and I'm always getting ganged up on. I added in several ways to restrict the ability of my opponents to cast spells, but it often happens that I either draw these tax effects or the drain cards, not some of each. I'd just like you to review and see what ideas you have to rebalance the number of cards in each category. If I'm going to be arch enemy, I want the deck to be able to handle the pressure, and I completely understand. I love being arch enemy. It's one of my favorite things to do. Present the table with a threat and see if they can stop you is a lot of fun. And looking at this deck list, I think I have a few ideas on the directions to go into, and I think generally it's really good. I really do like it. So we're going to be in what I like to call nitpick territory. We are looking at singular cards and we're going to be very critical of them, I should say. But before we get into that, let's take a look at our commander and what they do for our deck. If you'd like to take a look at the deck list we're talking about today, or if you'd like to submit your own deck list to me so that I can make a video assisting your deck, please check the video description down below. So who is Seizan Perverter of Truth and why are they our mono black force draw commander? Seizan is a 6/5 legendary demon spirit for 5, 2 of it black, and they have one ability, and it says at the beginning of each player's upkeep, that player loses 2 life and draws 2 cards. This is a very strong enabler for force draw. The other one that you usually see is Children of the Apocalypse, who here says whenever you draw a card, gain 2 life. Whenever an opponent draws a card, they lose 2 life. The reason these 2 cards are often used as commanders is because one is a really good enabler and the other one's a really good payoff. Children is a very good payoff. If you can force draws, Children does the work, and Seizan is the one that forces draws so the rest of your cards do work. Looking at the deck list itself, I can tell that it's very powerful. It's got very strong cards, it's got game changers, it's got a 2-card combo with the, where are you, Blood Chief's Ascension, and where's our artifact, Mind Crank, where if you're aware, once this is online, Mind Crank and 1 damage will mill out all your opponents, which is fantastic. Yeah, all your opponents because you get to pick. So there's a lot of strength in it. We've got really powerful cards like Anvil of Bogarden. We've got very expensive cards such as Nether Void. So we've got a lot of directions to go into and to think about. So as I said before, one of the things I want to be kind of nitpicky on is the power level of certain direct cards, like certain specific cards, because we're at the point that our deck is very strong and we need to be able to be taking out 3 opponents while holding our own, while setting up to defeat them. And what we have is a few cards here and there that I'm just not as much of a fan of. Starting from it, I think the first one really is Murderous Rider, or Swift End, really, right? We play Murderous Rider for Swift End with the upside of being able to cast the Murderous Rider. And I think this is just not strong enough for this kind of deck. Not only is this Murderous Rider as a creature not particularly worthwhile, not particularly interesting, Swift End is also particularly overpriced. 3 mana, destroy target creature or planeswalker is just a card you can have without losing 2 life, without having to attach it to Murderous Rider, and I think you'll generally be happier with just lower mana versions of this. And depending on what you like, you could just play like Fatal Pushes, Fells. I have a few cards I want to suggest, but this is just too much mana. We're at the point we need to be very, very efficient with our mana, and we're running out of the ability to do so when we play these kind of cards. I think also, and this is a difficult one to say, but Fate Unraveler, I don't like this card that much. I think, once again, this is a card that's very much so overpriced. I do understand its strength, but it is the weakest version of this effect in this deck. The only time I like Fate Unraveler is if you can give her Infect. If you can give her Infect, all of a sudden she becomes very, very good, which is something you can only also do on the Orcish Bowmasters. But for because we're not doing that, Fate Unraveler is 4 mana for an ability that's just stronger on a bunch of creatures. Shieldred does twice as much. Of course, she doesn't do damage, so the Infect combo doesn't work. Bowmasters is half the mana and creates bodies. And of course, Underworld Dreams is just harder to interact with. So I like these a lot more. And I do understand to an extent that, like, there's also Obnixilis, sorry, I missed that one, but we might be saying at this point that, like, well, Cursed, we want a certain number of these effects. We're playing quite a few tutors. I think we're playing enough of these effects that we don't really need to play all of them. We need to play the right one. Objectively, most of the time the right one is Shieldred, because she just does the most and gains its life. But that doesn't mean Orcish Bowmasters can't be the right one. It doesn't mean that Underworld Dreams can't be the right one, or even Obnixilis, the Hate Twisted, can be the right one. But finding the correct one is more important than having a high number of it. I think also, yeah, there's this idea of, like, these creatures that we're playing that we want them to be able to also attack or be a threat or a blocker, and I think I want to step away from that. I want lots of these creatures to just be there to be attackers, effects, and not really worry about attacking. And with that in mind, that also makes me a little critical of Gix Yawgmoth Praetor. Gix is one of my favorite cards. I think this is an incredibly powerful card. It's got all the text that I love. It has a really, really good payoff. So take note that I'm being exceedingly harsh on it. This may just not be the deck for Gix, because what's crazy is that it starts incentivizing your opponents to attack you more, and Gix is not a particularly good blocker and will not be able to attack very profitably on most boards your opponents start presenting to you. What do I mean by this? Well, I mean, the idea of this deck is you're going to make enemies of everyone, right? You're going to draw them and hopefully get them to draw more and more, burning through their life totals and winning the game. Gix is supposed to be in here to represent to your opponents that, hey, check it out, you get extra draws for attacking my opponents, and you're going to, you know, divert that attention from me and take extra damage from the card draw. That's the whole game plan. But here, your opponents already hate you. They're not going to be willing to attack each other. And if they're worried about their life total because you have, you know, Shieldred out, you have Underworld Dreams out, where now it's going to be 3 life per card draw, 4 off of Gix's ability, they have a way to not allow that to happen, Gix's ability, by once again attacking you, right? Like, this is double incentivizing that. If your opponents just look at each other, shake hands, and say, we're attacking you, actually, all of this ability basically does nothing. And that's incredibly, incredibly bad. The second ability, I will take a note of Discard X, this pseudo, what is the Sultai card? I can't remember it right now, but the money card, you know what I'm talking about. The one lets you exile cards off the top of your opponent's deck and play cards under X. Here it's just play any card. This is really powerful, and this is a very strong win condition. However, this now becomes a 10 mana ability, right? Because you want to play Gix and you want to use the ability right away, because that first half of Gix just doesn't do anything. And I'm going to suggest that that's probably not good enough. I'm going to suggest a different X spell to win you the game, but here Gix is, I think, just holding the deck back a little bit. You know, Gix looks like a really, really strong card, but they're just not performing here. So I would cut him very, very quickly. as much as it pains me to do so. Looking down here, I think there's two cards here that really catch my eye. Damnable Pact is probably just getting too weak at this power level. Once again, don't get me wrong, I understand that we're running Cabal Coffers and Cabal Stronghold. We have some mana doubling. Like, it's very doable to make this card run X for a really, really high mana, or a really high amount. But I still feel like that's just not enough, because this targets one opponent or yourself. If you're targeting yourself, things must have gone real wrong, I have to admit. And if you're targeting an opponent, you're hopefully taking them out. However, you still need to pump a lot into X for this to be worthwhile. And I just don't know if I like that. Like, I think I'd rather just play Sign in Blood, as crazy as it is, because Sign in Blood is 2 mana to draw 2 on your turn, or 2 mana to do, like, probably a good amount of damage to an opponent. And I think that's just going to be more versatile, and in times where you are behind, a better use of your mana than Damnable Pact. I really do like the Pact, but I just don't think it's the card here. Looking down here as well, once again, I mean, this is a mono black deck. I love every card in it. It breaks my heart to say these things, but Head Games is probably too weak at this point. If it doesn't draw the cards to replace the hand, which is also good because that's how the card works, but therefore this is just a replace every card in your opponent's hand with a land. And that's not very good. Like, it's not bad, don't get me wrong. I get the idea that you look at an opponent and you go, hey, you have a scary hand, I'm threatened by you, I know you're the one that can stop me, I'm just going to turn your hand into the worst card. But, and this is a pretty big but, I don't think it does anything, right? Because even if you, let's ignore how Head Games works. Let's pretend Head Games says target opponent discards their hand. All of it's gone. I probably still don't like it here, because not only if your opponents are at this power level that this deck represents are going to be able to draw themselves out because they have really strong cards, it also just, you're drawing them multiple cards a turn. So, like, I do get how Head Games is better than, like, a card that just discards their hand because it works with overfilling their hand. But even then, I just don't think this is good. Like, your opponents are going to be drawing 3, maybe more cards a turn, so they will get the cards that you've gotten rid of back eventually, or equally powerful cards. So Head Games feels like 5 mana to really just do nothing. I think if you just use, like, it's very, very close to Dark Deal, right? Where Dark Deal, everyone throws out the cards in their hands and gets a fresh one. This is pretty close, and it's a third of the mana. Yes, that you get to draw them all only lands, but Dark Deal is all your opponents. Like, it's just by comparison not a good card. It is a fun card. It is not a good card, unfortunately. Looking through our instance, I'm generally happy. I have no problem there. Looking through artifacts, I think we're probably at the point where some of our 2 mana and 3 mana rocks, well, specifically the 1, I'm no longer that interested in. Thought Vessel and Decanter of Endless Water feel like they need to get cut. I understand why they're here. Fundamentally, I do. But I'm going to suggest that that's not good enough. I'm going to suggest that I would like you to play without these, just for a while. And yeah, it's gonna suck sometimes, you're gonna have to discard cards, but I genuinely think that that's not a bad thing. One, I don't think you care. When you draw enough cards, you're just not in a bad position. You will get rid of some cards, but those cards weren't good anyways, and you can't just keep every card forever and cast them all. Here's the idea. You have 20 cards in your hand at a certain point because you played Decanter of Endless Water and then you draw 20 cards. How many cards do you cast before the end of the game, right? I would say you probably cast, it's a hypothetical situation, but it's probably not going to be 20, right? You're probably not going to cast 20 cards. Usually in a game of Magic, after you've drawn 20 cards, the game is pretty close to being over. Either you just use Necropotence and you're about to get bolted out of the game, or you've just won the game by drawing 20 cards, right? So with that in mind, I don't think you're going to cast 20 cards. So how many cards are you going to cast? If the answer is higher than 7, but over multiple turns, even then, I think you don't care about having an open, like a endless hand, right? Because unless you cast like 15 cards that turn, who cares, right? It doesn't matter, because you're going to, discarding down is going to keep you the good cards. Sorry, I'm getting all over the place. Let's do it straightforwardly. Unless you cast an enormous amount of cards out of your hand turn after turn, and you need to keep them all in there, which you don't, these effects don't do anything, right? Just discard down to 7. I've used Necroponents, I've used Necrodom, I love these cards. Discard down to hand size, it's not a problem. You're going to be fine, I promise you. You probably already won the game by drawing that many. So with that in mind, those two are really, really easy to cut. I wonder to a degree Arcane Signet and Felwar Stone. I'm pretty sure these two can also get cut. They just feel particularly weak here. You're not rushing that much to a 4-mana spell. You actually want to take your time and cast a lot of really good cards. You have really strong cards at every mana cost that you want out on curve. I don't really think these two are going to make a very, very big difference in the way you play your deck, so I would like to cut them. I know there's something to be said how they interact with cards like Thorn of Amethyst by regaining you the mana you would be losing, but they themselves do not interact well with those cards to begin with, so I think it's a toss-up, and I ultimately think that they should go. Looking at enchantments, I generally like the enchantments. Price of Knowledge feels like a lot of mana, but it does represent a really, really high amount of damage. I just wish it wasn't 7. 7 is just a ton of mana for this effect, and if it doesn't immediately start knocking players out, I think you're going to feel pretty bad about it. That being said, that art is metal, and it's going to cause some reactions in players, which might be worth it. Unless you play with children and you are a child, maybe this game is too old for you. Okay, that's generally the cards I have to say. Once again, the deck is really, really strong. I'm very much so nitpicking these cards because I really do think we're close. We're very close on how good these are. But let's go into additions. The first one's really, really simply is I think we could be playing the Bolt lands from Modern Horizons 3. I think they're just both really, really good here. They both have effects that are very, very strong. Shutting down one of your opponent's graveyards can be very, very powerful at a certain point, and Fel the Profane as removal is also very strong. I don't know to what degree I would like these to replace Agadeem's Awakening and Malakir Rebirth. I probably think I'd replace the Agadeem's Awakening, but leave the Malakir Rebirth, but I leave it up to you. I think they're both very, very strong and can very easily fit in here with a very low opportunity cost. Going into the control aspect of this, and the big thing that Xavier was asking is the blend of how many cards we need to hold down our opponents, like to stacks them out of the game, and how many ones we can use to force draws to win the game. And they were finding that the numbers were kind of back and forth. And the real answer I have is coming a bit later, but I do prefer the shutdown cards way, way more than the draw cards, because they have kind of an inverse relationship, right? The cards that kind of interfere with your opponent's plan sometimes can be undone by the mass draw that you're providing, right? Because they can be drawing into the card that allows you to then to destroy the lock piece. So I prefer more lock pieces or more control than I do draws, and then once you have the table under control, you slam the draw effects, and then their cards are very much so taxed because they have so many control cards and the draw cards all to contend with, and they can't keep up with that. That would be my plan. So one of the first ones, and this is kind of a light one, it's the same thing with the Bogart Trawler before, Dauthi Voidwalker. Dauthi Voidwalker, of course, is a little better because it is just an effect like a static rest in peace effect for your opponents, and it allows you to cast one of those spells at I believe instant speed. I always forget this. Normal timing. Okay, yeah. So you still have to cast it in normal timing, but you can cast a lot of really good instant speed spells, which I think is very, very worthwhile. This allows you to have counter magic in a deck that otherwise really doesn't have access to counter magic, and I think that's a really big difference. I don't think you really attack with this creature. I think you're very much so incentivized just to keep it up and get like one instant underneath it and threaten to use it anytime. But do know that at a certain point you have to use it, and you can't just hold up a counter spell forever with the idea that, ooh, it's spooky, you might counter their spell. Like, eventually your opponents are going to force you to do it, and when this is already a arch enemy situation, that time's gonna come sooner than you think. So be sure to plan out your Dothy Voidwalker. Another one that I think is even more important and a game changer as well is the Opposition Agent. I think this one is incredibly powerful for this deck. We have a lot of game changers. I put this as a 4. When I imported it, it didn't tell me, and I forgot to check what it was set at. But with all these tutors and a 2-card combo, I think very much so we are in the bracket 4, if brackets matter to you. So with that in mind, I do want the next game changer effect, and since we can play more, and Opposition Agent does just a lot for us. Not only does it just cancel out our opponent's tutors to get out of our locks, it allows their tutors to be our tutors, right? To be able to get the next lock piece to further stress them out and further, like, get ahead. Or you can use it to draw into the forced draw pieces. Like, very, very strong. At worst, it's a good attacker, it's a good blocker, it's a rattlesnake. You flash it in and block it. It can do work, but I really think Opposition Agent needs to be in here. Going into a little more removal, I said earlier I wanted to change a bit of the removal, and I've got 2 edict effects here that I really do like. We could play more, but these are the 2 I want, and I have my reasons for it. The first one is a Cursed Marauder. A Cursed Marauder is a symmetrical edict. Everyone edicts, including you. And I like this effect when it's on a creature because it then enables you to get rid of this creature, and therefore you're not going down on cards. A Cursed Marauder, of course, says non-token as well, which can make a huge difference in certain circumstances. Not always, but usually. And it's worth noting that this can be a great turn 2 play against a bunch of green decks where, you know, they've spent mana on their first 1-drop, or if you're later in the turn cycle, their 2-drop, and a Cursed Marauder will clean that all up, giving you a really nice 3-for-1 early in the game. Very, very strong, a very, very powerful card. Sometimes it's all about just a good effect for lower mana, and a Cursed Marauder does that very, very well. And speaking of this effect at low mana, I think it's worth considering Innocent Blood. I think Innocent Blood is a card that is very much so undervalued for how strong it is, mainly because people feel that problem that I alluded to, where this isn't on a creature, so you're going down 2 cards. One of your creatures, this card, and your opponents are ideally each losing a creature. But here's the thing. This deck is actually very, very low on creatures. So I think most of the time, most of the game, Innocent Blood is going to represent just you don't need to sacrifice anything on your side because you have nothing, and each of your opponents sacrifice a card. And at 1 mana, this also means, like, if you're about to play your first creature, like your commander, and you have an additional black mana, you can just Innocent Blood ahead of time and then slime down your commander in order to make the most of it. And later in the game, Innocent Blood loses a bit of value because you have creatures, but also Innocent Blood just loses value late in the game, so it doesn't matter. You don't mind discarding it to hand signs. I will say, just to add on to that direction, Innocent Blood also regains value after a board clear because you no longer have creatures out, and each of your opponents are going to start rebuilding, so they're going to have lower amounts of creatures. So it is a card I value throughout the entire game, but it is a particular card. I know it's got a bit of a, that reputation of it, if you're not building into aristocrats, it doesn't feel good. And I'm going to say, if you build black and you're low creatures in the sense that you're expecting to not have creatures most of the game, Innocent Blood is very, very powerful. Speaking of things that I feel like the deck could really use, or all black decks can use, Necro Dominance feels specifically missing here, right? Necrodom is such a good card. It is the smaller version of Necropotence, and though we can also play Necropotence, the thing about Necrodom is that it draws you the cards. That's the important part here. So your own draw effects get incredibly powerful. Namely, I'm looking at the Psychosis Crawler, I'm looking at Shieldred, and it cuts down on your maximum hand size. We talked about maximum hand size before. Don't worry, you're gonna be okay. And it also exiles everything that would be leaving your from anywhere, not leaving anywhere. Just if they go to the graveyard, they're gonna be exiled. So I think this is really, really strong. I think this can represent at certain points in the game a 2-card combo by playing this in Psychosis Crawler, or and just immediately taking out your opponent's life totals down like 30, 40, depending on how much life. 40 should be a bit hard for you to do if you haven't gained life, but like at least you could do like 20 to 30 damage to each of your opponents in one go, which I think is very, very powerful, while also, you know, representing a perfect hand at the end of it. So I really, really like this. I think it's very, very strong, and it's notably missing. If you also want to play Necropotence, it plays a little differently, but I still think it's worthwhile. If you've never turned one Dark Ritual into Necro and then drawn like 20 cards, it is a good time. I really do recommend it. This is exactly where I come on the idea that you don't need a maximum hand size alterer, because when you've drawn 20 cards and discarded 13 to 15 of them, you're still winning the game. I'm speaking from experience. It is absolutely very, very strong. So Necrodom, I think, is notably missing. Another interesting thing here is Veto. And Veto's standing in for kind of this, whenever you gain life, target opponent loses that much life effect. There's a few here and there. The really good one being Sorin is harder to access. And then there's like the enchantment, the Enduring Snake. That one, if it dies, it stays. It doesn't really matter which one you pick. They all have the same effect, the same line of text. I just like Veto because it's low mana. And it's here to work with Shieldred. That's the whole point. And you might be like, well, Cursed, Shieldred's not your commander, and I get that Shieldred's really strong. Do we need another effect like to make Shieldred better? And I'm going to suggest that there is something to this. The first thing to note is that this enables you to win incredibly quickly in a situation where you had to get through a turn cycle, right? The difference between Veto and Shieldred and just Shieldred is that Shieldred triggers on your opponent's draws, which means they have more time and more game actions to take before they lose. Whereas Veto, triggering off of your draws, something the deck can force easier, gets you further ahead and gets you a little bit into a better situation where you can do a tremendous damage to one player, knock them out, and then threaten to kill to defeat the other two players on the turn cycle. That and these creatures you control gain lifelink until end of turn can be text used with Orcish Bowmaster or the Fate Unraveler, even though I said to take it out. That being said, I'm a little unsure about this card. I think it's really interesting and it works with some of the other additions that I have, but it's worth considering as maybe not good enough or maybe really good. I don't know for sure. I think it's really going to land on whether or not this ability here, this 5-mana creatures you control gain lifelink until end of turn, whether this matters or not is going to make a big difference. Because, you know, you use this, you put it on your commander, you attack with your commander, and all of a sudden you gain 6 life, and an opponent loses 6 life, and that life gets you a little further ahead, lets you pay more for Necrodom, something like that. That can make a really, really big difference, and I think it's very, very, very good in those scenarios. I just don't know how often we'll be in those scenarios, so this is here kind of tentatively. So this is the big card. This is the card I really, really want you to play, and it's Beseech the Mirror. So Beseech the Mirror's whole thing is that it's a 4-mana tutor, but if you sacrifice an artifact, enchantment, or token, you then get to put that card into play. You get to cast that card immediately. For a while when the One Ring was around in Modern, this was like seen as maybe a card that can be played. It just didn't end up being the case because why cast 2 cards when you can cast 1 card was the whole idea. However, in Commander, we don't have that kind of situation, and we have a much bigger pool to dig out of to get the cards we want. And Beseech the Mirror, I think, gets way, way better here, right? because now what we're trying to do is decide which one of our 4 mana cards or less that we really, really like. Notably Shieldred, notably I'll have to remember the world enchantments that costs our opponent out of the game. Nether Void, which means all spells cost 3 more. Notably, what is it? I guess the Underworld Dreams, Black Market Connections, the Necrodoms, those kind of effects. That's the one. Teferi's Puzzle Box, I think, is another really, really good one to pull out and put there, because that's representing like 6 to 7 extra cards drawn by each of your opponents on their turns. These are the cards I want to tutor onto the battlefield. Unfortunately, it misses Psychosis Crawler, but it hits a lot of the deck and a lot of the strongest cards in the deck. And I think this also answers the greatest question I think people who might be considering this deck are going to have. That question is going to be, why is Shieldred just not your commander? She is really, really powerful, and the main reason you don't play Shieldred as your commander is because she's so threatening to your opponents. But if your opponents have already caught on to the fact that your deck is super threatening and now they're arch enemying you, why not lean into it and just play Shieldred? And Beseech the Mirror is a really good version, rebuttal of that, because Beseech the Mirror can get you Shieldred, but it can't get you Seizan. So if you're, or Seizan, we'll decide eventually on that name. It can't get you your commander. So with that in mind, Beseech gets better with Shieldred in the 99. And being able to Beseech into Shieldred, Beseech into any of these cards, I think is going to make a huge difference. If you were to play other cards such as No Mercy and the like, I think Beseech gets even better, but as it is, I think it's strong enough. Finally, and I think this is the last card, Torment of Hellfire I think sticks out as being notably missing. I almost like this more than Extenuate. I like this more than the Gix's ability as a mana sink. This is the one that I want you to pour a bunch of mana into. I get that it's one of those cards that players sometimes feel like doesn't deserve the wins it gets, because, you know, your opponents have been you've been playing a different game the whole time, and then you draw this card and you have like Cabal Coffers out, so you generate like 15 extra mana, and all of a sudden you put it into this and you just win, and that one cast invalidates everything else in the game, some people say. I don't feel that way. I feel like Torment of Hellfire is a fantastic card that I love to cast. So for me, it's really easy to say, please play this card, it's fantastic, but I will leave it to the deck builder. I would say at this power level, if you're worried that your opponents are going to focus fire you every game, you need to be showing up with this kind of strength. And Torment of Hellfire represents that kind of power, right? You can use this at a high mana cost to just get your opponents into a position where they have to start sacrificing things, and then even if they're not, you know, they're not knocked out from that, the card draw and the burn that you're providing threaten to get you the rest of the way there, which I think is phenomenal. Just note that do not cast this for low amounts of mana. Recently, I played a game on MTG Mudstas. I'm trying to remember what I was playing, but one of my opponents was playing just a mono blacklist, doesn't really matter, and he put, I think, 6 or 7 into Torment of Hailfire. So we had to do this 6 or 7 times. Regardless of what it was, we just all took the damage. I think it was seven times, and we just each took 21 damage, and the game just continued. And I think that's the worst case scenario, where you Torment of Hailfire at a number and your opponents all just look at you and go, whatever, and then just take the damage. So I do recommend being able to at least hit 10, 11, 12, or wait until life totals are low enough that it's actually meaningful. There is one more card looking at Bolas here that I think is worth considering, and it's Bolas' Citadel. This is another game changer. This is another card that if you haven't had the pleasure of playing, it is a crazy good card. It is very, very powerful, and I think it does a lot of work here, especially with Shieldred and other life gain methods. You can really buy back a lot of that life, and though it doesn't work with the Abyss card, the World Enchantment card, it does work with everything else, and I think it is worth considering. I think this is a really, really good top-end card for the deck, but at this point, we're just kind of going, all of the good stuff that we can put in the deck. So that one I'm a little iffy on. Otherwise, I really do like this deck. I think it's very strong. I didn't quite look through the land list or the mana curve. I already knew that I had done it before, and the deck itself looked very straightforward. And at this power level, I don't think we need to worry about that. I believe that this one should be Demolition Field. It's Demolition Field, right? I could be saying it wrong. This one is going to ramp all your opponents, whereas the other one only ramps the opponent you target. Replaces the land you destroy. So I would make that change. But otherwise, 35 with 37 MDFCs seems fine. You could go to 36 and it wouldn't be much of a difference. But those are my thoughts. This is a fantastic deck. This looks like so much fun to play. It's really mean. I really like that Seizan is the commander here because it is a commander that you don't often see, and I think it's very much so worth it. And this is a very strong build to support them. Yeah. Thank you so much, Xavier, for supporting the channel and setting this deck list. I'm really excited to hear more about it because this looks so sweet, and I'm glad you're keeping up with it and trying it over and over again. All right, good luck and happy deck building. Thank you so much for watching. This video is brought to you by viewers like you and people on my Patreon. If you'd like to send me another draft of this deck or any deck, there is a link in the video description down below. And if you'd like to make your deck one of my donation decks I work on, there's a link there too. Finally, if you'd like to like, comment, subscribe, I would be very appreciative. It helps the channel quite a bit. Thank you and good luck in brewing and building.